Yes. Yes, I am now. All right. Oh, the angels. You get your row. You get your row. No, your row. You got your 7. Oh, that's on the shoes. Oh, there she is. All right, I think we're supposed to start. It's 9:01. Good morning. I'm on. Seems like it's on. You hear it? Vaughn, turn up the volume. Hey, I need volume. I need volume. Mute. Mute button. Mute button. Mute button. Button. Press the button. 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 Hit the button, man. Hit the button. Hit the button. Button. All right. You good? There we go. Is that on now? I can't tell. 2 reasons. Am I on? I got nothing. How about now? How about now? Mic? Mic? Microphone? How about now? Anything? Do I have anything? I got nothing. I don't know. Can you hear me at all? No. Nothing? Jack it up. It's just at the bottom of the bulletin. Do I know it? It's not mine. That stand doesn't get it. Not my job. Isn't that what you're supposed to say? Not my job. Walk away. All right, good morning. Oh, I don't know. Good morning. Hey, welcome to morning Bible class. Or I should say welcome back to morning Bible class. We used to do this, now we're doing it again. So, I think the mic's on now. I couldn't tell earlier if it's on. Like, it's really on now. So we made up for the 3 minutes I was talking to you a second ago and you didn't hear a thing I said. But I can't tell if it was on a while ago because it's a little more echoey in here now, you may have noticed. And I think I sneezed like 7 times before I left the house this morning. And I guess whatever the pollen spore that released this week is the one I'm allergic to. And so anyway, I've been up at Atlanta. As leaders this weekend. It was a lot different, but want to just tell you that I think we were about 1,000 people up there instead of the normal 3,000, and over the national conventions across the country, it was about 8,000 total rather than the 20,000 that they had back in 2019. So it was a little different, but everything went well. We had a couple of our young ladies do songs of praise, and also Liam Mackey did a song for the Bartimaeus event. And when Liam walked across, I should have had this up here. I should have played the video for you, and I may try to get it up there, or maybe just put it on the Facebook page. They called him across the stage individually, and so Liam realized he had an audience. And so Liam performed a little on stage, and it was something to see. Hopefully Lisa puts that on Facebook. If she doesn't, I will, with her permission, put it out there. So anyway, that was a fun weekend. So just a quick report from Lads to Leaders. Walk for Water. If you want to open up your camera app on your phone and you point it at that little squiggly box up there, then it will open up the registration page. If you are not registered already, go ahead and do that. Be sharing that with folks so that we can have a great Walk for Water coming up on the 30th. That is a Friday night. We'll start registration at 5:30, and then the walk will begin somewhere between 5:30 and 6:30. We'll probably let people kind of do a rolling start so we don't just throw a whole bunch of people on the cart path at one time. Going to head that way, go around the lake, and come back. It's going to be a lot of fun, so I want to make sure we keep pushing that and keep mentioning that. All right, I think that's all of our commercials as we get started this morning. Welcome back again to our 9 o'clock Bible class. We'll follow this morning with 10 o'clock worship and then our mask required service at noon. So thank you again for being flexible as we continue to make schedule changes that the elders may think are best at the time. So anyway, we are going to continue talking about spiritual disciplines this morning, and what we're going to talk about this morning is the spiritual discipline of our service, service to God. There's an ad for the Pony Express back in 1860. It only ran about 18 months. It's kind of interesting to me how famous the Pony Express is, and it was only around for about 18 months. And the deal was, from St. Joseph, Missouri, they were going to go almost 2,000 miles to Sacramento, California, and take the letter or package that you gave them, and they're going to get it there between 8 and 10 days. That's a long ride in a very short time on a horse. All right? And you remember how the Pony Express worked? They would ride about 7,500 miles a day. They would get to the next place, either switch the letter to another rider, or even the rider switch horses because that horse is worn out, and they'd keep going until they got there. And this is the ad that they wanted to put out. Wanted, young, skinny, wiry fellows, not over 18, must be expert riders, willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. Wages $25 a week. How about that? Orphans preferred. Isn't that interesting? Who would answer that ad? Well, Aaron McCullough is the only one. That's not surprising. But it's just a matter of, these are the honest facts about the service that they're requiring. They want to let you know that something bad may happen. And, you know, when you think about the story around the Pony Express, what do you think about? Well, you think about the thrill and the excitement. And you're getting out there and you're riding across half the country or 2/3 of the country or whatever it might be from Missouri to California. And you think about the adventure and you think about, you know, they kind of got romanticized probably, just kind of like Westerns we watch now about that time period in our history. It's a little romanticized, and, you know, there might be somebody, pow, shoot him, and I keep riding. You know, it's real exciting. But it did not, you know, what you don't think about when you get into something like that, or maybe when you read that ad, is it's you out there all by yourself. It's going to get super lonely. In the wintertime, it's going to be very, very cold, and there will be winter weather, and you got to keep riding. In the summer, it's going to be blazing hot, and you got to keep riding. Now, what they carried with them, what do you think they carried with them? They had a gun, but it wasn't a rifle. Rifle's too heavy. These guys have to they have to ride fast. They had a pistol. They had the package or the letter. They may have had a knife also, and they had their horse. That's it. And so there could be attacks from either Native Americans or people trying to stop the Pony Express and take whatever that package is they had. The extreme temperatures we talked about, they're riding day, they're riding night, they're switching up and just jumping on a horse and keep going. And so, you look at that and you appreciate the honest facts. That this is something that you may risk death daily. And so they put it out there to say, hey, this is what we need. And when you think about your service to God, sometimes we think about different things. We think possibly about the romanticized part of it. Let me jump back just a second. We think about maybe I get to go on a mission trip to a tropical island. Well, that doesn't sound so bad to serve God in a tropical island. And after 6 days of door-knocking service, I get to go to the beach and do a little snorkeling. Sounds like a fun plan. We may think about, great success. And maybe I knock 100 doors and I baptize 90 of them. And we think, man, that's going to be fantastic. That's what it's like to go and serve God. And you think about maybe a little bit of recognition and being able to show a result. Maybe you think about teaching hundreds or thousands. But the honest facts, when you talk about service to God, the honest facts really boil down to it's not a job for the casually interested person. It is a costly endeavor. It's a priority. It's not a pastime. It's not just something extra. It's not the leftovers after all your other commitments are fulfilled. And it is a lifelong commitment. It is not. There's not a retirement age. Sometimes serving God, instead of teaching 1,000, you may be teaching one. You may be on your knees washing feet. You may be in a church basement in some obscure city teaching 4 kids from the neighborhood who just came to hear a Bible story. There's no glory in that. There's probably no thanks in that. And you may wonder if there's even any impact. It may be some obscure corner on a city street that you live in instead of that tropical paradise that sometimes we try to attain or go to. And we don't go to those things, I think, for the wrong motives. It's just part of it. And there's a lot of people who are very successful in these places with a lot of the missions that we support. It may be loading a dirty warehouse. You're standing there and you're loading boxes in a dirty warehouse so that they can go to someone in some other location. Underappreciated, maybe not even noticed. It may be delivering groceries to a homeless person who calls you late at night. A lot of things, a lot of times when we're serving God, a lot of times that service is only visible to God. So you talk about the honest facts. It's not always glamour. It's not always notoriety. It's not always being recognized, appreciated, or even thanked. Sometimes it's just getting down and dirty and doing what other people need. Luke 9:23-24, and he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. So the costly service that God is asking of us is our lives. We're giving our lives to Him to serve Him, a life of service. So our service to God must become a spiritual discipline. Now remember, spiritual disciplines are going to lead us to become more godly, more holy, and more Christ-like. That's why we create a spiritual discipline in our lives. And just as a quick review, when you go back, I think this is all the way back to the first class. Let's see. But we have nothing to do, the bottom there, nothing to do with worldly fables fit only for old women. On the other hand, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. And so, disciplining yourself. What does that mean to discipline ourselves? Orderly conduct to create a pattern of behavior. Training that molds and perfects the mental faculties or moral behavior. And so when you think about discipline, what do you think about? Other than your children. Don't think about children. That's the wrong discipline. Does it fit that? Does it fit that idea? This idea of creating a conduct or a pattern of behavior. You're creating a habit, for one, and habits are okay. We don't want habits to become empty and just repetitive for no good reason. But when we're creating a discipline in our life, that is us controlling ourselves. Paul mentions disciplining his body. And so it's a matter of, for service, we have to create a spiritual discipline, and the reason is we have the enemies of our service to God, and that's sloth and pride. The great enemies of service to God is sloth and pride. If we don't discipline ourselves for the sake of Christ and His kingdom for the purpose of godliness, what we'll do is sloth and pride kind of enter in, and all of a sudden we find ourselves serving God only occasionally. We may only serve God when it is convenient to us, or we may only serve when we're ultimately serving ourselves. And so you kind of fall back in the romanticized version of what service to God is rather than what it really is. And sloth and pride are the enemies that will cause that. You remember in Matthew 6, beginning in verse 1 and 2, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. Okay? Number one, it starts with beware. When you say beware, that is something you may fall into. You're being cautioned. Jesus is cautioning you that this may happen. Why? You remember the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. We fall back into those things if we can't discipline ourselves and create that pattern of behavior and that pattern of conduct in our life. Beware of practicing your righteousness. Again, Matthew 6, 1 through 2. Before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. That will be your reward. If all I'm doing it for is for the glory of those around us and for those to recognize me and understand how great I am as a servant to God, then congratulations, you can get your certificate. That's all you're going to get. It will not be a reward from your Father in heaven. Verse 2, thus when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what the right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Going back to that idea that a lot of times when we serve God, God is the only one who's going to see it, and that's okay. God may be the only one who knows about it, and that's okay. Don't let sloth and pride enter into our lives to affect the way we serve God, to affect what we're seeking when we serve God. Now, you think about this, and we've talked about this with all the spiritual disciplines, with Bible intake and with meditation and with prayer, all the topics we've talked about over the past couple of months. And it's true that our service should just flow out from us. Our service should flow out from a life that's been transformed by Jesus Christ, a life that's been transformed by His Holy Spirit. And so we should just be serving all the time. It should just be something that we could hardly stop. But again, the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. Sloth, pride, and many, many other things are going to creep in. Time is going to creep in. Excuses will creep in. And we'll have all the reasons why we really have trouble serving God. And I think it's an interesting thing when we look at service to God. We always, as a church body, we look at it kind of as a service project. And when we make everything a project, it has a start time, it has an end time, it has a committee meeting, it has instructions to follow, and those things are good, right? Sometimes that's how big things get done. But a lot of our service is just, again, that outflowing of a life that's been transformed by Jesus Christ. In Colossians 3:10, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them. But now you must put away all anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self and its practices, and put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of the Creator. Putting all the earthly, worldly, fleshly things behind us, we see the renewal that we have through Jesus Christ, and part of that life is the outflowing of our service to Him. So with all that, let's take a look at some motivations to serve. In order to create a discipline in our life, we do need motivation. And for a lot of people, you say, hey, Bible said it, do it, you're done. And that may work for them, but sometimes we may fall back and need some extra motivation and find out, why am I doing what I'm doing? How can I be more excited about it? How can I be pushed a little to do it? Maybe how can I be encouraged even by the Scriptures in order to increase my service to God and make my service to God a discipline within my life. Over in Deuteronomy chapter 13 and verse 4, it says, "You shall walk after the Lord and the Lord your God, and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice. And you shall serve him, hold fast to him." So obeying God, okay? It says to keep his commandments, obey his voice, you shall serve him. Our service to God is, number one motivator, out of obedience, okay? That's pretty easy, right? It's hard to argue with it. It does say it, so we should do it. If we walk after God, we're going to obey him. I think it's an interesting thing in the joy of obedience. Do you ever think about obedience being something you can be joyful about? You remember growing up, were you ever joyful about obeying your mom and dad? Or did you do the thing and you snatch around and you're all mad? You only do it once, typically. Or in my house, you go talk to Chuck. Chuck was a belt, by the way. His name was Chuck. Not sure how Chuck got his name. But it's hard to put those two things together, the joy that we have in obedience. There's a story, John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace. There's another passage that he writes, and not word for word, but I'll give you the gist of it. What he says is, if God were to tell two angels, this angel, I need you to go down and be a king of a great, great kingdom. This angel, I need you to go down and be a beggar. Those two angels would obey God with the exact same amount of joy because they find joy in obedience. Can we find the same joy in simply obeying the commands in the Word of God? Jesus says we are a friend to him if we keep his commandments. And that should bring us great joy. Therefore, we find joy in our service, and we find our motivation from, number one, just simply obeying the Word of God. Number two, what motivates us to serve is our gratitude. Now, again, we know that, we mentioned it should just flow out of us. We should just serve because serving is the right thing to do, and we should be super happy about it. Over in 1 Samuel 12:24, it says, "Only fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart, for consider what great things he's done for you." So the idea here is to serve God because of the great things he's done for you. Maybe the reason we have trouble becoming a better servant or having service become a discipline in our lives, service is something that we think about every day and we see a need, we meet it, that sort of thing, is because we forget what God has done for us. Sometimes we get a little full of ourselves. We go back to the enemies of service, which is pride, right? Hey, I got this. I'm good enough to do this by myself. And we forget what God has done for us. So it's out of our gratitude that we can serve God. Out of our thanks, we will serve him. It's kind of that idea of paying it forward. Why do we pay it forward? Because you certainly can't pay it back. What has God done for us? Well, if nothing else, and here we are on Easter Sunday when every Sunday, okay, we'll make that statement that we focus on the resurrection of Jesus Christ and we celebrate that. Here's Easter Sunday, which is on the calendar, the day Christ came out of the tomb, and when you think about that and you realize, and that may be the disconnect there, is sometimes we forget we were lost and forget what condition we were in. And we can remember that and realize what God did for us by sending his Son for us. The least we could do is serve. The least we could do is work hard for him. 1 Peter 4:10 and 11, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. Our service to God is our thanks to him. It is a gratitude to him. It is recognizing what he did for us, and also recognizing that we cannot ever fully repay him for that, but we're going to work really hard trying. Not working to earn a salvation, but we're working because of our salvation. And God is glorified, God is praised through that service. What else motivates us to serve? How about gladness? Psalm 100, make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Put a smile on while you're doing it, right? Come into his presence with singing, the rest of that verse says. Not grudgingly, not gloomily, not with an attitude or a note of obligation. It's our privilege to serve him, and we come before him in gladness. If you remember back in Nehemiah, I think we talked about Nehemiah a couple of weeks ago, talking about prayer. When Nehemiah came before the king, and the king recognized that Nehemiah, he said that you look sad. You look down. It's a sadness of the heart, he said. You're not sick. As he's serving the king, the expectation is that you serve the king with gladness. You serve a king happily. All right? There were, during that time period and throughout history of kingdoms like that could get you put out of your service to the king if you come before the king and you seem like it's a burden for you to serve the king, or you come before him grudgingly and you have that downcast look on your face. Well, he'll have you removed from service, thrown into prison, possibly killed. Because he can go get another servant that will come before him, and he will smile and be happy as he serves the king. And we're not talking about false gladness. Obviously, this is genuine. Serve the Lord with gladness. Over in Psalm 84, let's look at Psalm 84 and verse 10. I got it right here. It says, "For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness." Do we understand the greatness that it is, the great privilege that we have to come before God and serve him as his children, as his people? When our service gets hard, when there's no reward, no thanks, no one even knows what you're doing, that's probably the hardest times. Now, you have probably done something for the church in your lifetime that you didn't enjoy. I think a lot of times when we look for ways to serve God, we look for things that we're good at, and that's good. We look for opportunities that we enjoy. So it's something I'm good at, I enjoy doing it, and I can serve God and serve the church by doing it. That's okay. But sometimes we got to do the thing that needs to be done. And sometimes doing the thing that needs to be done, you may not like. I don't know, fill in the blank, whatever, door knocking. Let's just throw that out there just as an example of something we don't really do anymore. But you don't pounding the pavement like that. Well, I'm not real good at that. Well, sometimes it just needs to be done. I'm not real good at, well, actually, I'm pretty good at loading a dishwasher. I don't like doing it. I reload it after Lana loads it because you can get more dishes in, and there's certain places things go, and it's just, I don't love it, though, but it's got to be done, right? I don't know how often I load the dishwasher with gladness. I certainly don't do that. I like to share that task, too. Anyway, the point is that there are times in our lives, our service to God, that there are going to be things that we've already talked about. There's no thanks and there's no credit given. But it's also something that that we just don't like to do. But it's a thing that needs to be done, and we realize that that's part of our service to God is to do it, and do it happily, understanding that we are serving our Creator. We're giving back to Him, and not only should that be out of gratitude, but also create a lot of gladness in our heart. Another motivator for our service to God is motivated by forgiveness, not guilt. Forgiveness, not guilt. Now, over in Isaiah chapter 6, you remember Isaiah standing there before the Lord, and here, I'm going to turn over there. I've only got a couple verses listed here. I'll read a little bit of that. I got verse 4. Let's start in verse 4. That'll be fine. So Isaiah 6:4, it says, "The foundation of the threshold shook, and the voice of him who called the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips. I dwell in the midst of the people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King of the Lord of hosts." So right here, Isaiah has realized that he's a man, and that he is flesh, and he is standing before God, and he shouldn't be there. The sin in his life, his unclean lips that he says, "Woe is me, for I am lost." I should not be standing here before God right now. I'm not capable of that. I'm not worthy of that. And then in verse 6, one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for." And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Then I said, "Here I am, send me." And he said, "Go and say this to the people." And he goes on from there. So look at what happened here. He's standing before God. He realizes he's guilty. He realizes he's full of sin. He realizes he shouldn't be there. But then as the seraphim comes down and he touches his lips with the coal, his sin has been atoned for. His sin has been taken away. And so God says, well, who should I send? When Isaiah volunteered at that point, why did he volunteer? Was it out of guilt? Well, I guess I need to make up for that sin you took away. No. It was because he had been forgiven. It was because his sin had been taken away. Now he was worthy to go and serve God. Now he was worthy to stand and hear the request and the command of God. Over in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, for by grace you have been saved through faith. It's not of your own doing, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that you may boast. But we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Now in 2 Corinthians 5, it also tells us, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. So take that. If you're in Christ, you're a new creation. And back in Ephesians 2, it says we were created for good works. It's a natural outflow. Once you have been forgiven, once you are a new creation in Jesus Christ, you have been created for these good works. Just like Isaiah realizing that now that my sins have been taken away, now that my sins and my lips have been cleansed, my sin has been atoned for, I now can say, here I am, God, send me. Not of the guilt of my sin is gone. Rather, it is because of the forgiveness that God has granted. Let's keep walking through it. All right. Next motivator for our service to God is humility. Over in John chapter 13, let's go to John 13, 12 through 16. And here we are where Jesus has come in. He wraps the towel around his waist. He gets down pretty much face to the floor, and he washes his apostles' feet. Okay? One of the most servant things you could possibly do. And it was something that was done by a house servant. It was necessary, but it was also an act of service for your guests to come in and for you to wash their feet and sort of elevate them in that role. And Jesus is the one being the servant at this point. It's confusing to his apostles. Now, Peter, you remember that he says, well, you're not going to wash my feet. And he says, I have to wash your feet. And he says, well, you wash my whole body. And Peter kind of speaking out there as Peter usually did. Picking up there in John 13, verse 12, says, when he washed their feet and he put on the outer garments and he resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I've given you an example that you also should do just as I've done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you, and if you do them. There at the end, when he talks about the servant's not greater than his master, and so if your master's the one sitting there, this example Jesus is giving them, if he is washing feet, then you realize my master's washing feet, therefore I too am being called to wash feet. You're being called to that lowly service. Again, those things that will get no recognition, those things that will never be seen by anyone other than God. And that is serving out of the motivator of humility. When we struggle, and we're trying to create this as a discipline, we're trying to create this as a part of our lives, as something not only that flows out of us because we're saved, but something that we actually do on purpose and intentional, and that's something we've talked about throughout the spiritual disciplines, is that these things must be intentional. We make time and we make effort for them. Service is the same way. And as we're doing that, remembering the humility that Jesus teaches here, we remember that we serve because of the example he gave us. Jesus was the ultimate servant. When you look at him and you think about walking with Jesus over those 3 years, a lot of teaching, right? A lot of teaching to his apostles, teaching others, but so much service. When he saw a need, he wanted to meet that need. He had compassion for those around us. And, I think that is something that really plays into our service as well, is looking at something. It's not just meeting a need, but there's something behind that need. It's having compassion on the person, because ultimately that's who you're serving. It's not just doing a thing, It's actually meeting a need for a person. The other day, I do want to say thank you. We'll take a little stop, break here. And back on Monday, Tuesday, and half the day on Wednesday, we were over with the supplies that the disaster relief organization, Churches of Christ Disaster Relief Effort, sent to us from Nashville. Had those over in a big parking lot in Noonan. We're able to hand out some stuff to some of the people who were affected by the tornadoes a week and a half or so ago. And, it was more than just doing the service. It was more than putting a box of food in a car. It was more than giving someone a rake. As they came through, what you did is you looked somebody in the eye and you saw that they needed something, that they had really been impacted, and demonstrating God's love through that type of service. And so you talk about serving someone through humility. It's understanding that we are following that example that Jesus has set for us. We're certainly not doing it again to be boastful. Philippians 2:3, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. So when we start looking at people and deciding that that person and their needs and where they are in life is more important than my time and then my nap on the couch or whatever it might be, because it's going to take away from something in our lives. When we start serving God the way God called us to do it, we're going to give up something. So there's sacrifice involved, right? But we do it because we're counting others more significant than us. What is the need that I can meet? What is the need that I can meet? And we see here the example of Jesus doing it through an attitude of humility. Last one here, ultimately, what should motivate us to serve? Motivate us to serve is our love for those around us. We go back and we say, where's that outflow? What's the struggle that we're having for making service just a part of our life and making this a discipline? Finding our motivation. Over in Galatians chapter 5:13, it says, "For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another." Ultimately, all of these, you could probably wrap them all up. We love God, we obey Him. We love God, we thank Him. We love God, we serve with gladness. We love God because of the forgiveness and the love He gave us first. And then we see the humility and the love that's involved there with Jesus, on His face, serving His apostles, washing their feet. And so we are called to serve through our love for our fellow man. We serve each other within the church. We serve people outside the church. And we do it because we're called to love. 2 Corinthians 5:15, "For the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded this, that one has died for all, therefore all have died, and He died for all, that those who might live might no longer live for themselves, but for Him, for their sake died, who's for their sake died and was raised." Sometime we don't like to serve. We don't like the actual service. And, we talked about this before, is we've done things in the past, and it's just something that we don't enjoy. But part of that is looking at the person and realizing that we love them. We're no longer living for ourselves, as Paul wrote, but we're living for them. And that's when love begins to control us. And it says here, the love of Christ controls us. And when the love of Christ controls us, it compels us to step outside of these likes, dislikes, or whatever the pride or the sloth, or what are the barriers that we create and build in our lives, and we start serving God for all these right reasons. And I think, well, there you go. I think I'm going to give you an extra about 15 minutes here. There you go. So that's my gift to you this morning on this Easter Sunday. That's what we have on service for this week as far as creating a spiritual discipline in our life. Another commercial here for Walk for Water. It is a way to serve. You remember the couple Sunday, or I guess it was last Sunday, when Colton was here, and you saw these pictures of these villages, and we saw some names of people who were actually directly impacted by the wells that we were able to help them dig, by the funds we were able to raise. And so, it may seem like a simple thing, and this is one of those big things. I think when we talked about different types of service, this is one of those big things where, we had our pictures last year, and we get this big book back, and it has some pictures in it, and a big celebrated project. And but there's ways to take this and make it into something, a lot more meaningful and personal. And so I encourage you to do that, but certainly encourage you to be a part of our Walk for Water. All right, so I'll give you back those 10, 15 minutes or so. I'll stop there. Thank you guys for being here this morning. Happy Easter, and we'll get started about 10 o'clock.